I don't know why, but there it is. So thanks a lot for that. What I'd like to do now is to go back and let me see. We'll be answering those questions with each one of the groups. I know my group is still sort of working this out, but let's just keep going. How about with my group, we can start it out, or the group that I was in, Team Plato, start out really briefly, talk about the moral dilemma you were facing, if it was a dilemma, and or this real quickly talk about the narrative, and then walk us through why it was a decision that warranted deliberate moral reflection, why it was a moral dilemma or a test of integrity, and then maybe briefly how we would have gone through those four factors. And Maria or Mark, either one of you can chime in.
Do you want me to go through ours? Is that what you're saying? Oh, Mark. Oh, your group. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so for Maria or Mark, either one of you can start with this.
I was going to let Mark go. I felt like he had a better handle.
Okay.
Easier.
Hey, Mark, are you with us? Okay, I think we've lost Mark in the transition. Okay, so Maria, for sake of time, can you kind of, and I can help as well?
Sure. So do you want me to explain like the case first?
Real quickly, in
okay.
a sentence or two.
Okay, so there's a SEAL leading a 4-man reconnaissance, and they're on this mission, and they're waiting for the next cycle of darkness to get away, and then all of a sudden they're come across with Afghani goat herd, and they're pretty sure they're part of the Taliban, and they're going to get reported. So the dilemma is whether they tie them up and essentially like let them die, or let them go. But then that's going to put them at risk for basically getting tipped off. And so our group was working through the dilemma of what to do with the goat herd, and how even if you know that letting them go will put your own people at risk, what are the constraints that you're facing with this decision?
So I know that there was y'all were talking for a long time whether this was just a test of integrity. What did y'all think about that?
Well, I guess Mark's still not here.
Oh, there you just joined.
Okay, we said that it wasn't simply a test of integrity. It was a moral dilemma on some level because we didn't know the answer. It was one of those situations where we had to really work through it, and the answer wasn't immediately apparent.
Yeah, Mark, did you want to add anything to that? The question was, is this a test of integrity or a moral dilemma?
I think it started out feeling like a test of integrity, but the more we talked about it, it became a moral dilemma. Because it felt like, I kept thinking it feels like the trolley with even more unknowns,
Because it feels like, well, my perception is these sorts of questions it feels like a lose-lose situation. Well, it is. And so you're kind of, what are the considerations? And then you're, I guess, starting to think of those special obligations, like your obligations to your own people. But then what do you do?
Cool. And then in the interest of time, maybe some of the quick moral factors of the 4 moral factors, what was sort of most salient for you? And anybody, so Karen and Catherine, and I, again, Mark kind of comes and goes. So if you all can talk through some of your thoughts on that.
I think Mark can still can't hear, I'm guessing. But yeah, I mean, the constraints just kept getting building, right? If you kill them, it would be murder because you have them in custody, so they're not actually a danger to you, and they're not armed in the first place. But if you don't kill them, the lives of your people, right, is at stake. So you have an obligation to them as well as an obligation to the mission itself. So it really,
And
yeah. Go.
Mark brought up if you do kill them, not only are you murderers, but you have to live with that you killed an old man and some youths to preserve your lives, to preserve perhaps your mission. We don't have as many details on that, but that there are consequences that in the long term that you're going to have to live with as a result of that. And I suppose you'd also have to murder all the, murder's not the right word, but you'd have to kill all the goats, because they'll also let people know of your whereabouts.
Yeah, and we don't know, but we can assume that the future of some group of people is dependent on the survival of the goats.
Good. Hey, so to summarize sort of what I had heard was it really did kind of get stuck on the fact that this may indeed just have been a test of integrity. Maybe we do know the right thing to do, but we did. The group did explore the moral factors, and then as we started thinking about rights, we recognized that while perhaps the goat herds have forfeited their rights, they regained them once they were captured. So again, this goes to our intuition. It was just a test of integrity. We started thinking about the consequences and the fact they weren't grave enough to override that huge constraint. And yes, you have special obligations to your troops, but at the end of the day, what is this going to do to your character as well? Could you survive that? So yes, I think we'll need to leave it at that and turn it over to the other group.
Yeah, I'm going to be real quick, Roger, because I know Jeff wanted us to be done by 10 till. So I'll just say that our case was a case that I wanted to include because it talks a little bit about ethical perceptions and less about the moral deliberation roadmap. So if you think about the last 2 hours that we talked about, it was a case about systemic injustice, and the best discussion was about why those that are more likely to be victims of kind of systemic injustice might be better at perceiving these kinds of issues, and how there was some good discussion about how we can maybe think about getting better ourselves at that. And I just think that that's useful as well when people are thinking about the ties to their classes. Moral deliberation is obviously one of the important aspects, but certainly I think in the next few years, at the very least, thinking about moral perception and how we can get better at that is also really, really, really important, and it's important for us to look to those ties as well. So I'll just leave it at that and turn it back over to Jeff.
Marcus and Roger, thanks very much for several hours of penetrating analysis and review of moral deliberations and ethics. We really do appreciate what you bring to this week-long workshop. I'm going to take control back again as we wrap up day number 2. And day number 2 then that we just finished started with sharing of last night's homework as we reflected on connections between the Naval Academy's ethics and leadership courses and your own academic disciplines curriculum. That was not captured on videotape. We began our videotaping from day 2 with a broad overview of moral reasoning based on how it's taught in NE 203, the ethics and moral reasoning for the naval officer that we just concluded. And then we'll finish up with our homework assignment for Wednesday, and I'd like to turn it over to our director for the Center of Teaching and Learning, Dr. Karen Sproles.
Good. Well, we asked you to complete some pre-homework before we even began this course, and that was to write some learning outcomes for whatever it is that you're planning to work on tomorrow and Thursday. So whether it's rethinking a course, rethinking an assignment, integrating something around ethics into something that you're already doing in class. So what we want to do for your homework tonight is to have you go back and look at those learning outcomes now that we've gone through this sort of primer on ethics, and think about whether you want to revise those. And I would just remind you, one of the things that's most difficult, I think, with writing learning outcomes is thinking about how you're going to assess them. So, what is it that, as a result of this work, the students are going to know and be able to do, and how are you going to be able to tell? So is that a reflection, a writing assignment, a quiz, an exam, a presentation? What kind of deliverable are you going to be looking for from the students? It could be a piece of some other assignment, but some way that you can assess whether or not you've been successful in getting them to understand, to get to the outcome that you've defined. And I also want to remind you that it's incredibly helpful to look at Bloom's taxonomy for words to use in describing your learning outcomes that will lead to the potential to assess them better. So, even if you want to start at that center, and I recommend Bloom's revised taxonomy, which is a circle instead of a pyramid. One of the things that's great about that is it reminds us that right in the middle are, sort of defining the terms. Whenever you start with a topic, you really begin with, sort of defining the terms of that topic, no matter how complicated and sophisticated it is. So, think about what concepts you're going to want them to be able to define and to understand. And Bloom's taxonomy will really help a lot with making sure that you start, with the center and work out so that you can work towards having them analyze, or which is what we just did, right? Or even create. So it's fun to think about having students, create a scenario, for example, or something along those lines. So just imagining taking them through all of the layers of Bloom to get to the most sophisticated understanding of the topic of ethics that you're going to be introducing as possible. So just look back at those learning outcomes and think about how you want to revise them to go forward with the projects we'll be working on for the rest of the week. And remembering that the result of that is the quad chart that's in the Google Classroom. So you can see what deliverable we're going to be looking for you to present about on Friday.
Okay, thanks very much, Karen. So to put today in perspective here, today was a broad overview of moral reasoning based on how we teach it at the Naval Academy. So looking forward to tomorrow, Dr. Cermak, Dean Catherine Cermak, will hold a workshop on constructing effective learning outcomes, and that's why it's important for tonight's homework to work on your own. And then we'll set aside some time to discuss how to use and incorporate technology. We've invited Mr. Michael Sears from the Stockdale Center in for that. And then we'll have some time set aside also for you to work on your projects. And Dr. Sproles alluded to quad charts. I know that makes some of the folks in the humanities begin to shake, but nonetheless, don't be dismayed. Here is what we're aiming for: a very basic summary of your project title that you're working on, along with an overview and significance, and then 4 areas drawn from your work on your own ethical project: learning outcomes, draft, lesson plan, timeline and assessment plan, and next steps. And as the yellow box insert says there, feel free to adjust the format as desired for your own project and your own clarity. So with that, we leave you here with a few extra minutes before the bewitching hour of 12 noon. Are there any closing comments or questions here before we adjourn?
Jeff, are we beginning at 9 o'clock tomorrow?
Yeah. Well, let me see. I think we had 9 o'clock for the last 2 days. First 3 days are 8 until 12.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
I should note that Thursday is going to be asynchronous, so you have some time to work on your projects in anticipation of delivering a presentation about them on Friday.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, thanks again for your participation. Thanks especially to Roger and to Marcus for your involvement. For our participants, we appreciate your time and your dedication, and we'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Thanks very much, and we'll see you tomorrow.